Hi, DeAnna and Kelly. How are you guys?
Good morning.
Good
We're doing
morning.
well. How are you?
Good, good. I'm so glad to have you guys back. You're, of course, one of my favorite farming families, and this time we get Kelly. We get Kelly along with DeAnna. Usually we just get to have DeAnna, so it's an extra treat. So you guys farm in North Dakota, and you have a company called Guardian Grains. Tell people a little more about what you farm and the products that you make out of what you farm.
Sure. Well, we farm 2,000 acres in central North Dakota in about a 2-mile radius. And we grow a variety of small grains. So, and also yellow peas and flax and mustard and oats are a part of that, and barley. And then we grow some heritage grains. So we grow a French heritage wheat called Rouge de Bordeaux. That's a red wheat, and spelt and Egyptian hulless barley. And those are what we've been focusing on and marketing through Guardian Grains as our heritage grains that we grow.
And turkey red. That's all hard
Right.
red winter.
Thank you for that. Turkey red is new to us. So, and that's our hard red winter wheat, right? So yeah.
That's great. And how long have you been farming?
I started in 1999,
All right.
my first year grain farming. And prior to that, I was raising livestock.
Mhm.
Since I was, I don't know, 10, 12, something like that. I had feeder lambs and sheep and stuff like that before I started grain farming in 99.
Yeah.
And I came to the farm in 2005 from the city. So
Really? I
yeah.
didn't know that, DeAnna.
Yes.
I thought you grew up on a farm as well.
No, I didn't. I
Huh.
did not grow up on a farm.
Well, you seem like a natural.
It suits me. It does. I came here in 2005, and in the beginning I joked that I traded my high heels for cowboy boots, and that's it. I couldn't be more at home than I am
That's
now.
a good trade.
Excellent trade. Works out great for me. But
I just do splats
from
now,
scratch.
but that's another story. Yeah.
I had to learn everything. So
that's good. Well, I know that we featured you on the podcast before, talking about, the great pasta that you make. And I love that line that you have, that, you're not interested in making more of the same, the same kind of nutritionless blonde pasta. And, I always like a dig at blonde. Sorry, that's not nice. But I love that. I love that, that you're really building substance into the food that you're creating. And recently in our community, Global Food and Farm, we were able to host you guys talking to the other farmers about a system that you've come up with that is explaining, to other farmers how they can enhance their soil health in ways that really help them cut inputs like fertilizer and things like that, and build the soil health in this really natural, amazing way. And as you were talking about it, I was really struck by how much this explains, all the things that we're talking about, the building up of soil health that then leads to more minerals and mineral availability, and then the flavor that comes from that, the health that comes from that, all of that. It's kind of at the root of all of that. And you guys have created this system called IMOS, and a series of videos to help people understand it and learn how to do it on their own farm. And as we were talking more, I also was thrilled to learn that this learning process for you came from working on your own garden. And so it's something that obviously people in their own gardens can do to really bring health back to their backyards. And how exciting would that be for people to actually do something, tangible, as well as, of course, buying your pasta. So to start out, maybe both of you just give them an idea of, so what is IMOS, indigenous microorganism? I shouldn't have even said it. Anyway, you'll tell them, give them an idea of what is IMOS, first and foremost, the high level view. What is this IMOS system you've come up with?
you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, it's our indigenous microorganism solution. So that's something that we started in our garden, in our high tunnels and our vegetables is where it all began. And we saw the benefits from restoring indigenous microorganisms, how it affected our crops at small scale, that we rapidly scaled that on broad acres, and it spread across our whole farm pretty rapidly. But basically what the whole concept was is we went out into our native areas on our farm, our natural habitats, those areas that are, the grass grows green every year for some odd reason that we don't exactly understand why, where the fruit trees are plentiful, the fruit's not diseased, the fruit is sweeter, it tastes good. We went to those areas and we borrowed small amounts of soil from those areas. We brought them back to the farm and we simply copied that. So whatever was there, we're not exactly sure, but we know it works, we know it functions. It's been working for 3.8 billion years. So we've accepted that. We can accept that. It's scaled. This is nature we're bringing back home. So it has scaled. It has proven itself. We simply brought that back, multiplied that biology at very high numbers, which initiates quorum sensing. So we bring those numbers to extremely high concentrations, so high population levels, and we reintroduce that onto the seed and in the soil in our gardens. So we brought basically nature's microbiome back into where our food was grown.
It sounds to me like after you've had a round of antibiotics as a person, and that like kills off all the life, and then you need to take probiotics to kind of help rebuild the life. But ideally, you're taking native probiotics, not just off the shelf probiotics that might not be the right ones, which is why the antibiotic issue is such a challenge, because we don't always restore our own microbiome well after that. But that sounds like something like akin to what you're doing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's key. A lot of people think probiotics come from that little jar.
Right. Exactly.
They all come from the soil. All of those beneficial microorganisms exist in nature in our soil. That's where they all come from.
Mm.
Yeah, we're not creating anything new,
Mm-hmm.
right? This is nothing. We're not creating new microbes, as Kelly likes to say. We're borrowing it from a thriving, functioning system and counting on those to come back into our gardens and come back into our farm fields. And so that we can get the benefit of those microbiome in our gut microbiome.
Well, it'd be into our food,
right.
And then we eat our food, and that transfers to our gut microbiome. So that's where our probiotics are all coming from. They're contained naturally in our food, in a biologically rich system like that.
Which is why that's so important to combine the prebiotic and the probiotic, like to eat the apple that you raise, let's say, in this soil health, this healthy soil. So then on the apple, it has the good probiotics, and the fiber in the apple is a prebiotic that feeds the probiotic.
Yes.
Together. Yeah.
We should all understand it the way you understand it. Right?
Well, that's also why your whole grain pasta is so important, because without the fiber, you're not feeding the microbes, the healthy microbes in your gut. And that's why we all have these chronic, inflammation.
And without the fiber, there's no digestibility. There's no nutrient absorption, right? They become super important.
Yeah.
But in order for those nutrients to be available in our food, they have to first be available in the soil.
Yeah, it's such an important point.
Right. So our people are sick because,
and that's the thing, they're there in the soil, but they may not be available to the plant, or the plant may not be getting them.
Right. Or the plant just hasn't utilized them in so long that they're no longer functioning.
Yeah.
And so that
is kind of dormant.
Right.
Yeah, they're no longer called upon to go to work,
right?
Because nutrients have been supplied to our plants so easily and readily that this biological pathway is no longer called upon.
Right.
Yeah.
And so to understand that a little bit about our system for your viewers that don't know. So in our farming system, in our gardening system, we are a no-till system. So no tillage ever. That's how we start. That's what we do to protect the soil microbiome first and foremost.
So just so people understand, then you're able to plant a crop by using a drill to like just drill down and drop a seed. As opposed to
in our big fields, it's just a drill and it makes the tiniest slice in the soil to disturb it as little as possible. And in our gardens, it's the same. So whether that is just making a hole with our finger or the smallest hole we can, with the smallest implement to put it our seeds in the ground, that's what we
You
do.
don't get out the rototiller.
No.
No, there's no rototilling happening here.
It's
Because,
like the sound the microbes make.
right? No, you can.
The
I can
worms.
hear the microbial community scream
The die off.
with the tillage instance. So
Yeah,
the idea
in our
is
gardens, the soil's always covered, so you never see the soil.
Mm.
Never visually see it with your eyes.
right. There's always covered.
Well,
Whether
it's a good rule of thumb, even for somebody that's not a full scale farmer, but that has a garden, a nice garden in the back, because that's the thing. I mean, we're always taught, you need to weed everything. You need to keep everything clean looking and get the plastic and get the, have all the rows and all the, and it's hard to make a mindset shift for a gardener as well as a farmer.
Oh,
That no, actually, you should not see bare soil when you look down.
And that was our gardens. We were still tilling gardens and doing no-till in our farming fields, right?
Yeah.
It took there was a huge mind shift that had to happen for us to go to no-till in our gardens, which makes complete sense, right? If we can do it on our broad scale fields, we should be able to do it in our gardens where we're growing all our vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
But it took us a little bit of time to wrap our brains around that. And so the idea is as little disturbance as possible, right? Whatever that might be, we want to disturb the soil microbiome as little as we can, and to feed it the best we can with the plants that we're growing, right?
Well, I do have to ask you, just since you have had experience with a garden and no-till, so I can see where you do just like the finger push or, a spade put, whatever, just a small to get it planted. But then as it's growing, I mean, how do you give the new seed the advantage over the weeds that are already there? I mean, how do you mitigate that so that you actually have vegetables as opposed to just, the weeds taking over?
Well, ideally, we would have had a cover crop from the fall
On the garden
prior, and
right.
had that winter kill and lay down. But last year we didn't get a cover crop seeded on the garden. So what we're counting on is soil cover, with whether that's mulch, that means like leaf litter, grasses.
Yeah, a lot of good biology on leaf litter, just to reintroduce that onto
That's such a great point, because I see, how many times do I see all these big plastic bags of leaves bagged up? Everybody's got them in there. Pick them up, take them to the trash. Like, hey, how about pour those on your garden?
That's perfect armor for your garden. Okay. Yes. So, and if that means putting cardboard down first as a weed barrier.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Right.
That's great.
And then wet that down and cover it then with leaf litter or grass clippings, assuming your grass hasn't been weeded and feeded, right? Like
heavily fertilized.
Right. You want to. And so just gather that up around and use it, and then wet it down, and you'll get weed suppression. You'll get moisture retention. There are lots of benefits from using your clippings and leaves and things like that around your yard. And then because it's not living anymore, your new plants in your garden aren't struggling or competing against anything. But
that's the critical point. I think people, when they think, at least when I think, no-till garden, okay, well, I guess you just go out to a patch of, it's already like fully grass and we, like, oh, just stick the seed in and, oh, hey, it didn't turn out. How, I knew I should have tilled it, well, you do have to do some preparation to help the new seeds.
That's right.
You don't have to till it.
No, right. So,
and the weeds, you'll be surprised when you're not, like, most gardeners will till it a lot, and then they'll think organically, and they'll think, well, we'll bring in some manures to replace nutrients in those. Well, when you're bringing in high levels of nitrates and phosphates, that's going to signal weed growth. So
they're always the big bad ones, right? They're the dandelions, they're the huge broadleaves that like the nitrate, and they're trying to get that out, right? So like they're serving a purpose, but we don't like to see them in our vegetable gardens competing. Right. So we basically use a lot of leaf litter, and actually, so we grow spelt, right? And we have to dehull that because there's a hard hull on it. That becomes, we save the hulls when we dehull, and that becomes mulch or are in between our rows and around the plants.
Because there's a lot of biology just on that hull from that grain.
Yeah. Well, like
Just-
grass clippings when you mow the lawn too, and you have it in the bag, you know,
Right. And the thing about grass clippings, right, is to let them sit a while.
let them dry out.
Right. You don't want them too green
Mm.
because it attracts a lot of slugs. So we don't want, you want them to kind of mature a little bit and get kind of dead looking and dried out. And then they become a great source of armor to keep your soil cooler, to keep moisture, for moisture retention, and also as a weed barrier, right? Because that's why people till, right? Because the weeds get so insane. So if we cover up in between the row with something else, the soil doesn't have to call those big bad weeds to cover it, because we're doing it for it, right?
And leaf drop is the perfect balance, because when a leaf falls off a tree, it's at the absolute perfect moisture level to go on a garden. So I mean, nature's already done the work for you. Just pick them up from underneath your trees and put them on your garden.
Yep.
That's fantastic. I love that people can actually have an experience with, regenerating their own, like a piece of their own yard.
I know, it seems like such a simple concept, right? Like, oh my gosh, you're using leaves from your trees. Like, that's a simple solution. And that's what we're finding. The best solutions for us on our farm or in our garden, they're the simple ones. The ones that seem to be overlooked, but such a simple solution to
and the ones that you don't have to pay anybody for.
You're gonna
that's why there's not a market to tell people about it, because who's selling you leaves? No, I won't probably sell
but here's the thing, right? We all either rake them or we mow them and bag them, right? With a mower, with a bagger. You're doing something usually in the spring to clean that up a little bit. So instead of bringing them to wherever people bring them in town, use it. And
once you switch over to a biological system, that soil becomes hungry. So it'll start cycling that residue faster than you can replace it. I mean, we're experiencing that on broad acres right now. With droughts coming up, we're having a hard time even supplying enough organic material on top of the soil to keep it covered. But you will find that out even on a garden once you switch to fertility, where you're not adding a lot of nitrates or phosphates. And I will say manure is fertilizer. A lot of people don't associate that. They say I don't use fertilizer, but I haul in a ton of manure. That is fertilizer.
Right. And it can also
synthetic or organic, it's fertilizer. And once we let biology do that, go down that metabolic pathway, it does start cycling that residue really fast.
And the idea is to get the plants communicating with the soil microbiome and feeding themselves from what is there in the soil, right? And so that's the goal. And so we try to interrupt that communication between the plant and the soil microbiome as little as possible. So we don't apply any fertilizer at all. We're not applying synthetic fertilizer. We're not applying manures. We don't put any, chemical seed treatment on. We're not using insecticide. We don't use fungicide, right? So there are a lot of things that we're not doing so that we can keep the communication open for that plant and the soil to feed itself, right? So that's the idea. And that's where our biology comes into play. That's where IMOS comes into play. And it becomes a biologically active system. And we're feeding the plants through biology rather than chemistry.
So once they've got their farm, their garden, let's say, set up and no-till planted, and they've got the biology kind of working for them, then your system
is too much of a stretch. Minimum disturbance.
Yeah, minimum disturbance.
Disturb just the row.
Yeah.
Okay, so like we're not asking for anybody to perform miracles, right? Disturb just the row that you're seeding.
3/4,
Right.
Right.
1 inch if you're going to plant a little row.
And then your walkway, because everyone needs those. Leave those, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Minimal disturbance,
Mhm.
right? I am a big advocate for no-till, right?
Mhm.
Everyone who knows me knows that. But even on a garden scale or in the field scale, minimal disturbance, right?
Mhm. Right.
So then, okay, so I just had to say that. It
No,
doesn't
no, you're absolutely right.
all
Absolutely right.
the way. It's not all or nothing, right?
That's right. That is right. So when we have that, and then the IMOS system. So as I understand it, what you're doing is when you say you borrow like a piece of soil, right? You like dig up a piece of soil from and how do you decide where to get that soil from? So I should say you dig it up and you are going to brew like a tea almost. You're going to brew a tea out of it and encourage all of the good biology to multiply, and then you're going to use that as a liquid that you pour onto your garden. So that's kind of all overall where we're going, what you're doing with the system. But how do you decide which piece of the soil to brew? Which piece of the soil to be the tea bag?
We use the plants as the biological indicator. So we'll look at our natural environment and we'll look where, that grass is greener on the other side of the fence, where that grass just naturally is green. We'll start out in grasslands, we'll move into treat areas. So we'll move up in succession in our soils. So as our soils go up in succession, we'll start to lose our grass species as we get closer to our trees. So we'll just gain a broad range of diversity from all of those functional groups in nature. So we'll work our way from our grasslands to our trees, in areas where disease doesn't seem to be a problem, where the grass looks stark green, where the fruit grows disease-free, where the insects don't bother it, where it seems to have plentiful water. And when you do look in those areas, you'll notice that you don't see the soil. It's covered up with plants or litter or leaf litter or something. It's not bare. The soil in those areas will be well aggregated, so it'll be nice and crumbly, good structure, so the water infiltrates through it. You'll notice a smell. So you'll take a handful of that soil and you smell it, and it smells like the forest floor. It's not going to smell like that in a tilled garden. You'll also, let's see here, you'll stay out of areas that will stand with water, because we don't want anything that's been underwater or waterlogged, because that can go anaerobic. So we'll stay out of areas that possibly could have been flooded. Stay out of areas that have runoff from city, feedlots, barnyards, manure applications, fields,
Garage.
Native as we can find
as possible, and
it's nearest to us as we can find.
It's surprising you get into those areas, and I mean, you just sit down and look around and listen, and everything seems to be functioning. Everything's just working together, and no one's in there influencing any of it. It's an area that we've just left alone, and biology has taken over and seems to function and work without us being in there. So that has taught us on the farm to try to do as minimal amount of impact as possible and try to tiptoe around these processes and not manipulate them in any way.
And what I love about that is, so the first thing you're telling people to do is observe. Like, look around you, look at what's working, look at what nature is doing. Nature is like already like figured all of this out. Like, here, this is the optimal spot. Like this is where things are going well. And you can see that because of what's going on above ground, because it's a reflection of the health below ground.
Right. It's just mimicking it, right? Biomimicry. It's just observing what's working and bringing that back to our fields or to our gardens and replicating it. That's all we're doing.
So should you move your garden to where that spot is, if you have the ability? I guess.
I don't think you.
Oh, because you're gonna bring that biology over.
Bring the biology to where you're at, right? And that's the idea. That's when we started using it in the gardens. It made sense that we could bring this biology back to our farm fields, to our cropland, that maybe it used to be there and it wasn't there anymore, or it was there in such small numbers that we weren't really seeing a benefit. So that's the idea with biology. You're getting bacteria, fungi, algae, all of it together, yeast, everything together from a native system, or as native as possible. And then we're reintroducing it on an annual cropland, whether that's our garden or the farm field, right?
But we've also, when we borrow from those areas, we have to observe what those areas look like. So when we borrow those native microorganisms, we can't bring them home and put them on a black tilled garden with 2,000 pounds of cattle manure applied to it.
They won't survive there.
They're not going to know what to, they won't survive in that kind of habitat. So we have to mimic that habitat where they came from. So we've got to come to the full understanding that that soil's got to be covered, that that soil's got to not be disturbed, to let those bacteria and fungi go to work to build aggregates, to build soil structure, so all your water goes in and goes through it.
Because
So
once we provide them a home, they'll stay there and they'll repopulate, right? The idea
it's not something you have to continue to do all the time. Once you give them food and habitat, that's what they're going to work for. Food and habitat, and the plants are going to give them the food they need. That's where their prebiotics are going to come from to feed those probiotics. So we feed them with seeds and plants.
So you need to get your garden set up well, and you do this IMOS process is a way of generating this, bringing this extra life, that's native, and that's the indigenous part. That's the important part, as opposed to, because there are things that you could buy, natural, and they call them bugs in a jug, and it sounds good, but it doesn't work as well if it's not suited to your specific area, because every piece of ground is different, very different, has a different thriving community. Different things should be in different places.
Right.
And so the beauty of this is that it is your own natural biology. It's what's best suited for your area. Just enhanced. But that does bring up a question. If you are, let's say you're in town and maybe you don't have a whole lot of, you have a backyard, but it's not like there's not a big thriving natural spot. One of the things that in talking with you guys before the interview, I think you mentioned, Kelly, is the potential of syncing up with a farmer in the area, or with, someone that's in your same general area, but that has more biology, and borrowing a piece of their soil. Of course, you'd have to build a relationship first. You don't just go taking soil. But this could be a great way to build a relationship and education between farmers who are doing this and gardeners that want to maybe bring more of that life that's native to their area, but maybe not already in their backyard.
Yeah, and those gardeners could go to those farms and speak to those farmers, because those farmers are the ones that are going to know that area better than anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
They grew up on those areas. They've been on those areas for years. They're going to know where the grass grows greener for some reason. I mean, you start asking those questions, they'll think back, and they might have walked over it and not really looked down, but it will trigger a memory that they will know why. They will know there's some areas on their farm that are naturally enhanced for some reason or another, and it might just turn a light bulb on in their own head that, hey, you're onto something, and you can go out there together into those spots, and maybe that's going to spark something that they can bring onto their own farm as well, and they might not have even been thinking about it. It's that simple. That's the thing with our system. It was so simple, and we're asked that a lot, like, can it be that easy? Like, we're not manufacturing anything, like, can it be that easy? It does. And yes, I believe it can. Nature's already done it for us.
Right.
Well, so then that brings us back to your system, and if you're a gardener and you want to try this, it is simple, but there are still steps you have to take and materials you need to gather. And the beauty of your IMOS system is that it is both a series of videos where you guys show them exactly how to do it, and a kit that helps you, put it all together. So maybe share more about, what's involved. If somebody goes to your website and signs up, buys the IMOS package, what do they What do they get?
Sure. So to start, just to give a little bit of context to that. So this will be year 5 for us on our farm, on all of the field acres that we've been leaning on native soil biology. So this is year 5 for us. And it has taken me a couple of years to convince Kelly that this information should be available to anybody who wanted it. So whether that's farmers or market gardeners or home gardeners, anybody that's growing food should have the option to learn how to harness the power of indigenous microorganisms in their system. And like I said, it took me a couple of years of coaxing him to put together a video series. And so that's what we did. It's a 5-part video series. It's 3 to 4 hours in length. You go to guardiangrains.com, click on IMOS, IMOS. That's Indigenous Microorganism Solution, right? It doesn't get any easier than that. And you can purchase the video series, which they will have unlimited access to. And they'll also have access to all the videos that we add on this spring. Because when we recorded the video series, it was not, well, we were buried under about 2 or 3 feet of snow. So we didn't, there's a lot of things that we'll be adding this spring and into the summer going forward. And so they have access to those videos. They can learn exactly the way we're using it in our system. And then they can take some liberties and use those in their system. And then we put together a couple of kits that are very easy and foolproof of foods that you feed these indigenous microorganisms. So your indigenous microorganisms, you feed them certain foods, and we have developed kits for those, and it makes it very easy. And they're in water soluble packaging, and there's no waste, and it makes it very easy to brew a 30-gallon batch, which might sound like a lot, but when we go out into our garden and I'm watering in the row by watering can or backpack sprayer or anything, 30 gallons doesn't go that far. And you have to remember what we're brewing and what we have is a living biology. It's life. So spray it anywhere. We spray it on budding trees. We spray it on fruiting trees. I spray it on all my ornamental flowers, right? My yard looks amazing since I'm spraying native biology on my perennial flowers. So you can, if there's extra, we can put it anywhere. And it'll
you have to dilute it, or can you put it on straight?
We put it on straight. So whether that we apply it to seed, that's biopriming. That's what we do on our broadacre fields. And then you can also apply it foliar over the top of your plants. You can apply it to the soil. And so it just comes 30 gallons straight into your watering can if you're doing it on a gardening scale, or right onto the seed, whichever. I mean, there's lots of ways it can work in different types of systems. And that's what's great about it, is that it's super flexible to be used for anyone, right? And the idea was to make it available for anyone wanting to lean on biology and further away from synthetics or even from manures, right? So to help their soil system communicate better with the plants they're growing. And there are a lot of biological options out there, like you had mentioned before. There's lots, and there's more coming on board all the time. And some of them may be good options, some of them may not be. But there isn't anyone that is actually showing you how to borrow from a native system to do it yourself. And there are a lot of people teaching compost methods, and that can work great. There were just too many hurdles for me to be able to manage a compost pile by myself, or like a Johnson Sioux bioreactor and keep it watered for 365 days. These systems work, but they were too complicated for me. And so I didn't do them, and we use a native biology, and we wanted everyone to have access to the information, and whether they want to buy their bugs in a jug or if they want to grow them from their indigenous microorganisms and actually have it be a live solution.
And when they do that with IMOS, I mean, there's going to be thousands of species in there. So unlike a bug in a jug where you're going to get, 2 or 3 things or one thing that's magic silver bullet, you're bringing in thousands of things. And when we do that, we establish that group behavior. So then now you've got a whole group of organisms working with, each has their own talent, each has their own specialty, but now they're able to work together and produce things that weren't able to be done before.
And that gets to quorum sensing. I know you mentioned that before, and it's something farmers are familiar with, but maybe consumers or just your average person isn't. So maybe share a little more about what is quorum sensing? How does that work?
Well, that can happen even in our own gut. So when we establish a massive population of beneficial organisms, those beneficial organisms will outnumber disease-causing organisms or pathogens or viruses or anything like that that were to come into attack us when we have these natural suppressive systems in high numbers. So they're able to activate microbial messengers so they can turn switches on and off, start closing gates, batten up the hatches, like, hey, a virus is coming, now we can defend ourselves against this. So those are all the different things that work together to allow those processes to happen to protect us. So we don't have to lean on antibiotics or vaccines or something. That's the things that are going to defend our plants. They defend our plants, they defend our soils, they defend our own gut.
And they sense that each other are around. Like, that's the crazy thing. Like that's the sensing part. Like, when there's enough of the population, they sense that they're there, and then they do what they're supposed to do
together to create what is needed, which is incredible.
But if there's not enough of them, they don't, then that sensing isn't triggered and they don't perform the beneficial act.
And they can actually communicate. So once there's enough of them, then you open up those lines of communication. Now all of a sudden, talk, so to speak, talk to each other.
Talk through chemicals. That's the amazing thing. We have a chemical language.
It's really incredible. And the key to that, like we've said, is diversity and volume, right? Not just a few. You need a lot of different things to come together to make that work. And the same thing it works in our gut microbiome is the same way it works in the soil microbiome. And so if we can work out a balance of the microbial community in the soil system, the plant will have that balance. And then the people and the animals eating that plant, or the seeds from that plant, or the fruit from that plant, get the benefit of what's happening in the soil. And that's how we can make it be a cycle, right? And so
restoring metabolic function,
right? Between if we can heal the soil, we can heal the people and the animals. And it sounds like a huge task, but if everyone can just do it on their little in their little biome, it works.
Well, that's what I love. I love about what you've done, because you basically created, I think, one of the most practical college courses you could have, or a high school. I mean, I think about homeschoolers too, that do a lot of, project work as part of supplementing, or just supplementing your schoolwork with your kid, a project that you could, talk about how really grounding your kid in understanding how healthy food is made, how biology works. There's so many great lessons that can be taken and experiences that can be had by working on this project within your family, in addition to obviously giving you much better vegetables and fruit, healthier, tastier. I'm sure your garden its taste has improved too. Have you noticed that over time?
Right.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Our gardens changed in flavor. Our grain fields have changed in flavor. We've noticed that across everything. And I mean, that started for us on 1/10 of an acre.
Right.
And it spread to 2,000.
And
which
it's native. That's the tasting terroir. It's the
is
native
exactly what you're
biology, so it's the native flavor that you are getting to taste.
Yes, and
Yes.
you talk about it in your podcast, right?
Mhm.
If a place could have a taste,
Mhm.
right? And
Well, that's the
that's
thing. Places do have taste. We've
exactly
masked them because we're putting all the same synthetic things on, or organic things. You know, we're putting the
true.
same kinds of food on the soil. Well, then that's gonna make sense that would create a similar. That would kind of blot
Well,
out
it
the
all tastes the
uniqueness
same,
of that,
right?
of that type of wheat, or that in that place. That wheat in that place,
Right.
gives you a different bread than wheat, the same variety of wheat in a different state, in a different, well, even in a different town,
And that's how important it is to source those like microorganisms locally, because that's why you're experiencing those different tastes. There's different sets and populations of microorganisms in different soils around the world.
Mhm.
So keep those as local as possible to keep those intact, so we do have a wheat here in North Dakota that might taste different than one that's grown in France or
Mhm.
something. So we're using that same biology. We're not taking all the biology from Florida and just shipping it all around the world.
Right.
Everyone's producing their own.
And I want to talk about a little bit about the indigenous microorganism that we borrow, right?
Mhm.
So we're not going in and clearing whole areas.
Mhm.
We are talking about 3 pounds of native soil.
Oh, that's very important. I don't think we talked about how much
Right. Just
you need.
Yeah, we're
right.
talking
So
handfuls, shovels,
this, it
not
just,
scrapers.
Yeah.
we're going in and, excavating areas. We are talking about 3 pounds doing 30 gallons of native biology to be applied to your seed or to your plants or to your trees, right? And when our system is developed in a way that you borrow the soil,
Mhm.
you replicate all the indigenous microorganisms that are in that soil for a 24-hour period. And when you are done with that soil, you return it. We're
So
not,
you're only borrowing the soil for 24 hours?
well, okay, so it brews in an aerated, it's an
Mhm.
aerated system for
Mhm.
24 hours. We actually feed the IMO
Mhm.
for 10 days prior
Okay. Mhm.
with, so there, it is
So it's
fed.
ready to receive it. Yeah.
Yes, it's
Mhm.
fed for 10 days prior to the 24-hour aerated brew cycle.
Mhm.
So in all actuality, it takes 12 days
Mhm.
from start to finish.
So labor is pretty low. There's not much time involved there in borrowing. And then once we got it in the containers, we just watch our moisture levels. But I mean, that's been a lot of the challenge with composting is the labor intensive. It's so intensively labor to do that at scale, when we're
Mhm.
talking thousands of acres. So this was pretty simple, easily managed for anybody, I think.
And when he says easily managed, so when he developed this system 5 years ago, he was wanting to introduce biology into our fields, and all of the options he was putting in front of me were way too labor intensive, way too many things I did not know, and too difficult for me to manage on my own.
With a newborn, I think pays
Right.
just
Well, they were 4 and 2, so still not a super amount of a lot of extra time, and it needed to be something I could do by myself while he was in the field, because like I said, we were biopriming our seed, so all of our seed is quote unquote naked,
Mhm.
and then we bioprime it with biology.
Mhm.
So it needed to be something I could do by myself. And this video series is broken down in such a way that if me as a mom or as a wife or a home gardener wanted to go down this route of IMOS, I can actually build my own little brewer using hardware store supplies. And
we have a video series on how to do that, how to build
it explains everything.
homemade, low cost.
And when we developed the system and the video series, I said, I need to be able for anyone to be able to watch this video and be able to build this. So even I can build it. I mean, I'm competent, but even I'm not that, you know, hands-on technical, but even I can watch the video and understand what to do. And that was the idea, was that anyone could do it.
Mhm.
And it could be something that I can manage on my own. And it works for us, and it's worked for us this will be the 5th season. And like Kelly said, it's not something, once we introduce the biology, this isn't something we're going to have to continue to do forever.
Mm.
But we have been coming out of a D4 drought for the last couple of years. And so, and we have gone through a very, very tough winter where we've had a lot of snow, a lot of cold, and we are going to reintroduce some biology this spring again, just to wake everybody up and get everyone functioning and remind everyone, like, hey, we can get together and work here.
Because we're 2 years in a row now during drought where our fall cover crops have not made it. Just it's too limited. So I mean, we're lacking some liquid sun being put into that system. Just that's what nature, that's the curveball she threw at us. So we're going to reintroduce some just because it's
And also,
it's going to be beneficial.
and also it's so easy. Why
Yeah.
why not?
Well, one of the things that I did want to ask you about, you're dealing with biology, and as anybody who's left something out and then gone on a trip and comes back, biology she can get kind of scary, if it takes a turn. Is there anything that people would have to worry about? And maybe your video series helps them be on the lookout. Like if it wasn't aerated well enough, or if it, can this go horribly wrong? Or or is it just, it's all friendly biology, nothing to worry about.
It can go wrong.
And we did a lot of testing with the O2 meter and stuff during brewing, and that was why we chose to pre-package all the foods and supply an air pump for the brewer, so we could manage our oxygen supply, and we gave the dimensions of the holes in the diffuser on the bottom, so all of that remains constant. So when we keep our oxygen levels constant and our food levels constant, then so far what we've seen, any soil going in there can be done with minimal effort. So whoever is using it isn't going to have to go in and monitor O2 levels and do a lot of microscope work. And
you can, you absolutely can,
but
you don't have to.
That natural system is, I mean, even the top scientists and the biologists in the world haven't uncovered, have barely seen the tip of the iceberg on what's under our feet there. So I mean, we don't want to get too in depth of a full understanding of that. We just have to come to the understanding that it works.
And the idea is that, and the reason for the kits, rather than just giving people a recipe, what to do for these foods, there are so many variations in quality of the foods that we have chosen, that there was just no control to be sure that people were going to get the same results that we get. And so we have chosen the foods that are we have found to be the best quality, and by pre-packaging that makes it so nobody has to try to find what we have found, and nobody has to measure it. It becomes very easy. It's all pre-packaged and water soluble. It's as easy as we could possibly make it. And in fact, it's so easy now, my job's going to be even easier this spring, because for the last 4 years, we haven't had pre-measured soluble packs. And now, so that's going to make it even, I didn't think the system could get any easier, but it is.
Because whether in a garden or in a farm, once you jump down that rabbit hole of everything getting easier, there's no coming back. When the weeding becomes easier, when the watering becomes easier, when the harvesting of the fruit becomes easier, when the bugs leave you alone, it becomes easier. When the diseases leave you alone, it becomes easier. I mean, everything just becomes easier. And once everything's easier, I mean, there's no going back to the dark side.
And that is what he's saying is true. So the biology in the soil has the capability to create a suppressive system where insects are not going to be a problem, where disease doesn't become a problem, right? So a functioning system, that's all because of the microbial community that's in the soil. If it is there, we can build that suppressive system. So like he said, we're not dealing with excessive pest pressure or disease. The biology is all responsible for that. And so by giving our soils or the seed or the plant a head start by applying this indigenous microorganism solution, then it has a better chance of being a more suppressive system, where we're not having to treat sick plants in the fields or in the gardens, because they are defending themselves and thriving on their own, which is the goal, right? To observe more and interfere less.
Yeah. No, that's really great. And I just want to remind people that they can get the system at guardiangrains.com, and you can buy it right there and get access to the videos. And then can they buy the kit? They buy the kit through the site too?
The kit they buy through the site, after they've purchased the video series, they get a link to a members page.
Okay.
And on that members page, then they can purchase the kits. So the idea is
know what you're doing first and then buy the kit.
Yes.
Let's not just run out there and start willy-nilly putting it together like an IKEA couch. Let's actually, learn a bit. It is biology.
That's, you have to have the knowledge and the understanding before we actually put something into practice.
Yeah.
And so that's the idea. And then
the biggest investment was that education in themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing they're gonna have to invest in.
Right. And so then it becomes very simple. And
but it's a joyful thing. It's like unlocking the secrets of nature and learning about, the system that's already been working without our knowledge. And we've been disrupting it, not intentionally, but, and we do it in our lives too. The kind of food that we eat that disrupts our gut microbiome, the kind of, it's like a similarity to the artificial things that we put on the soil. Well, how much processed crappy food have you been, using in your body that suppresses your microbiome or makes it hard to recognize what the heck, what did you just give me?
We have to remember that we shouldn't be feeding anything to the soil that we wouldn't eat ourselves. That microbial community doesn't deserve that, right? So we need to be as conscious of the community that is under our feet, because it's the largest ecosystem on the planet. And that becomes a very,
and probably the oldest.
Oh, for sure.
Yes, for sure.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
3 billion years it's been running.
Right.
And with IMOS, you don't have to worry about your pets and your kids and stuff when you're out there applying it and spraying it, because
it came from there. Yeah.
And then also our IMOS members are invited to join our WhatsApp chat in the community. So, and that has been awesome for Kelly and I, because we are getting to see how IMOS is working for other farmers. And it's been because they're sharing pictures and
they can ask questions then too.
And everyone can ask the questions, and we can all learn from each other, which has been a huge help. It's just like the Jill Clapperton network and what you guys are doing, where we're learning together, right? And so and that's what we've done with this WhatsApp chat. We didn't know what WhatsApp was until we opened a chat line for IMOS, but it was the best way that we could all connect. And that way, if there were questions, we might not be the only ones we might not have the answer. Somebody else might. And that's the great thing, is that we can all learn from each other.
And there's others trying things with IMOS that we haven't even done ourselves.
That's true. Lots.
Once you're caring for native soil in a container this big, it's really
like a 9 by 13 size.
Like you really are conscious on how you're caring for that. You're not compacting it. You're keeping it covered. You're keeping it moist. You're, doing all those things. And then you all of a sudden see all this life that benefits health come to fruition in a little container. Now you think, well, how can I do that on my entire garden?
Mhm.
How can I do that on my entire farm?
Mm-hmm.
Let's spread that out. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, so there's a visual mental thing that happens there too, as you're watching how you're caring for that small amount of soil in that container.
Yeah. I love that we've, thought about this for home gardeners too. I mean, it's great obviously for farmers, and it's starting to take off like wildfire. I know there are a bunch of farmers that are reaching out to you, and like you said, it can't be this simple, but it is. This is it. And you've had really good farmers I know say to you like, this is it. Like, I just like, this is it. This makes all the sense. This is like all bringing it all together. And that's fantastic. That would be fantastic by itself if it just stayed in the farm side. But I am really excited about the ability to apply this to the farm level or to the garden level, because not just the benefits that people can see and bring into their life with some fresh food that's enhanced with life, but then it opens that whole door to understanding why it's important to source, the food that they buy with care, and why it's important to, I've been encouraging people, and I'm going to continue to, maybe just pick one product a month that you buy direct from a farmer. We understand you can't buy everything, this way, and you can't, people have limited budgets and time and all of that, but make it a priority to buy, one thing directly from a farmer that's doing this kind of regenerative journey. And obviously you could buy many different things at your site, Guardian Grains. You've got great pasta and flour and just amazing stuff on the ability to buy that. And it's a real gift that you're giving to people. And I think a lot of people don't fully understand or appreciate all that goes into that, to be farmers and taking on all of that risk and all of that expense, and then adding on this whole different other world of making that what you grow into food. And that's a whole several other jobs, added in there that I'm sure Kelly was thrilled that you wanted,
I know.
to do.
I know.
We just brought in flaked breakfast barley yesterday.
Right,
So dressing a stone mill. I mean, I never thought I'd be doing that kind of stuff.
So that's the thing is, we had gotten to see the benefit
Mm-hmm.
on our farms, in our gardens, from regenerating the soil, right?
Mm-hmm.
We'd gotten to see it. But if that doesn't spread out into the community, then it ends at our farm.
Mm-hmm.
It ends at our gravel road. It shouldn't end there. For it to have the regeneration of our farm to have a lasting impact, it needs to spread out into the community. And the best way we can do that is through food. And it is not about, it's not about stacking enterprises. It's not about
making things more complicated.
It's not about vertical integration. It becomes a moral obligation to make these things available for people. And while our lives had gotten super simple and super easy, and there was a need. When there is a need, we need to find a way to provide it. And there was a need in my area from somebody looking for desiccant-free wheat berries. That's how it started. First of all,
Which,
I didn't know
you gotta
what
explain
the heck was a
desiccant.
wheat berry.
Yeah, well, you got to explain desiccant too.
Right. They just wanted to make sure that their wheat hadn't been sprayed over the top prior to harvest.
Yeah, with
And
chemicals. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that people didn't have access to that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I realized that people didn't have access to grains that weren't chemically sprayed over the top, it became something we had to do and had to offer. And that's how Guardian Grains started.
Mm-hmm.
And it has just been an evolution since then. And yes, am I adding more and more to our plates? Absolutely. And to our customers' plates? Absolutely. Kelly said we're just started with flaked barley. we've been enjoying breakfast barley on our farm for a full year, and now finally we're going to be able to offer it full scale for our customers. But so
And that's
yeah,
kind of like an oatmeal replacement, right? I mean, you can use it like a hot cereal.
yep. And you can do it like overnight oats, but it's overnight barley.
Mhm.
And the benefit of barley over oats is the protein content, right? Is not one of the things. The protein content of Egyptian hulless barley, besides it being one of the oldest grains ever, it predates wheat, right? So besides that, it has a protein content about 17 or 18%, where our milling oats are only at about 11%. They both are a great source of beta glucan, which is the immune system function activator, which we all need for our gut microbiome. But yeah, so it's and so yes, am I adding things? Always, right? And like he said, I had him at our production facility yesterday, learning how to dress our granite stones for our new American stone mill. So the learning never stops. Right. But that's part of it is just because people need access to better, not more, just better.
And I do think IMOS being brought in to the gardener will give them a better understanding of exactly what we're trying to accomplish here.
Absolutely. Yeah. I do too. And the understanding of, because one of the challenges, as you know, and I talk about it a lot on the podcast, that is so frustrating to me is there's a massive amount of marketing about regenerative that's out there, and it's very confusing. I mean, everything from, one additional practice thrown on to a system to, a complete life-filled system like what you guys are doing, and everything in between is called regenerative. And so it's very confusing to know what's real and what's what, especially when it doesn't lend itself to a checklist to be measured. It really, how can you put a checklist toward all this life that you're restoring? And so for people to get experience with that and to experience the difference in the taste and the health, just in seeing the vibrant nature of their garden, and the bees that are attracted to it, all the other insects that are drawn to it, because it's life draws life. And, so to see all of that, experience that, that's the kind of transition that a conscious consumer really needs to have that experience. It's not something that you can just pay a little extra for, and it's not the same. I mean, that's certainly fine. That's a good thing to do too. But wow, talk about a whole other level of understanding, what's important and what to prioritize. And then when you go into the marketing stream, you're better prepared as a consumer to sift through what you think is really worth, paying for, what is really bringing back this complex web of life. And it's certainly not just one or two practices in a fancy picture with a glowy farmer. It's it's not that. You need to tell me a little more before I believe you that you're,
Everyone should be growing something.
In that backyard garden,
even just a plant in your house.
It can be anything, or a patio tomato, anything that you can actually say you grew and get to pick from to nourish your body. There's a whole other sense of satisfaction being able to do that. And it doesn't have to be a whole garden scale, it can be a patio garden, it can be anything. And if you don't want to, go to somebody that does want to. And that's what I really appreciate about podcasts like this, is you're introducing people to the farmer. And if they can't grow it themselves, find somebody that does.
The nice thing about the garden, though, is they can visit that every day.
Yeah.
If it's in their home, they're going to see those things happen. They're going to be able to sit there in the silence and listen to the bees come in. They're going to be able to experience all those things. Where if they just go to a farm and visit once or twice a year, they might miss a lot of that. But right there in their garden, they will see biology take over and see how nature functions, and then they'll be able to smell those smells that come along with it, and those tastes that come along with it. And then that'll really trigger some things mentally that will establish a whole understanding of what we're trying to do on our farm, when they can see that every day. in their backyards.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you guys so much for taking all this time and for putting the system together and making it available and so easy to use and incorporate both at the farm level or at the garden level. I just really big fans of you guys and what you're doing, and thrilled that we can share this with our audience.
Well, thanks for giving us the opportunity. Who knows what we'll think of next?
I know. I look forward to it.
Thanks, Sarah.
Okay.